All right. Good morning. Good morning. Let's get the show started. Glad you're here. Hope you've had a great start to your week. We passed Hump Day. We're now on the backside of another fantastic week in the land of enchantment. Well, we all learned what the new normal is going to be, and that is going to be a place where we fall forward. New Mexico always falls forward. Glad you're here this morning. We got a great guest today, Mr. Samuel Collins, Deputy State Treasurer of the beautiful land of enchantment, Tierra del Encanto, New Mexico, the 47th. Sam, can you hear me okay? We doing all right?
I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
You sound good, sir.
Rock and roll.
All right. It's a few minutes after the hour. We're going to get started right away with some links that I'm going to put up on the current affairs. Good morning there, Harold Poop Jr. Great to see you this morning. Dr. Neely Lang, Ms. Homestead, Nancy Burse, our distinguished county treasurer here in Bernalillo County. Good morning and welcome to Cafecito con Colon, also known as extrovert therapy for me. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I knew quite early on that I had to find a way to stay engaged and connected and in touch with the people that I care about the most, and those are my friends, family, and community members here in New Mexico. So thank you for joining me to be my extrovert therapist this morning. Good morning, Aaron Monfeleto. You're looking terrific. And I just appreciate the positivity you're putting out there on a daily basis as well. And I can't wait to see you in person and you calling me anytime. Good morning, Jonathan Jones, and good morning, Donna and Shannon. I am glad to see you this morning. Welcome to Cafecito con Colon. And let me see here. Let me get started with some links, and then we can get right to our guest, incredible Sam Collins, our Deputy Treasurer of the beautiful land of enchantment. Let me start out by saying that, you know, in the last 48 hours, I have my men's group on Thursday mornings at 6 a.m., 6:30, and we talk a little bit about the highs and lows of our week and how we can become the best versions of ourselves we were created to be. And I was telling the men this morning that my highs and lows this week, I thought would have to do with Father's Day, which was awesome. But as it turned out, my highs and lows this week all happened within a 24-hour window. The low being when I learned about what took place with the hateful vandalism at a place that I care about and a family I care about in a community I care about deeply, Santa Fe. The vandalism that took place at the India Palace and with the Singh family. And so I learned of that. You all stepped up. We posted the GoFundMe link. Thank you, Ms. Olmstead, for putting that on there so quickly yesterday or day before. Raised $60,000 plus in just hours to help offset the over $100,000 worth of damage that was done to the restaurant with this hateful. I've never seen graffiti and violence and a violation of a space with. Well, I can't say never, but certainly it was up there in a way that was very painful to me, even from the outside looking in, and not being a member of the Singh family or the Sikh community or the Indian community. It was painful. And then the high for me was the love that was shown by our community. We stood with them last night. I think I posted the link to KRQE's coverage of our outreach and embracing of that family. In terms of what else we have going on local, what other local news did I hear? The continued conversation about the monuments and statues in New Mexico during this time. The Albuquerque Journal covered the continued conversation about the obelisk in Santa Fe Plaza. And then I think I'm just going to go to some national pieces here real quick. And I want to not miss an opportunity to, and I think we're now on the 25th of Pride Month, and I haven't done a great job of promoting that conversation while I've been a Pride supporter and participant in the community celebrations and lifting up that community, the LGBTQ plus community for many years. I haven't done a good job of posting a lot of stuff about that on Cafecito. So let me do a couple quick posts about that now. One from the Business Journal, the ABQ Business Weekly, and talking about, or the ABQ Albuquerque Business First, building a workspace and place that supports the LGBTQ community. And then I wanted to put up also the Human Rights Alliance website there in Santa Fe. Give you a lot of good information there. Good morning, Alex Vaz. Good morning, John Moore. Good morning, Pammy. Good to see you this morning. But there's a link with a lot of the virtual Pride opportunities to tune in. Oh, and Virgin Galactic, everybody knows that I'm a fan of the spaceport and hoping that that will become a bright spot on our balance sheet. But Virgin Galactic and Richard Branson bringing new activity to Spaceport America. So interesting stuff going on there. Let's see here. Oh, this was a very powerful piece on NPR. I didn't post the podcast, but here's a written story about the challenges in coming out during this time and any time, and the conversation from both sides, regardless of the loving environment you're raised in and the family that you have. Coming out is still a challenge to navigate. And I thought that this NPR piece did a good job pointing that out. Finally, on NPR, let me give you one more piece there about we've got some states that are really spiking now in terms of COVID-19 positive testing on both sides of us geographically. We've got Arizona on one side, we got Texas on the other, and then we got Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, who is being applauded as having done the best practices, the earliest, and why we've been able to maintain the numbers we've been able to maintain in New Mexico. Thank you, Secretary Scrace. Thank you, Secretary Kunkel. Thank you to the entire cabinet and to Michelle Lujan Grisham for her leadership. In that regard, let me just say specifically, the governor is going to hold, this is my 5th week now of hosting Trusted Black Voices concurrently, 6 days a week, every day, bringing in a trusted voice to inspire and inform and educate us. And that is no different today when we have our Deputy State Treasurer with us. But Michelle Lujan Grisham is going to have a private only in so much as that the bandwidth to engage people and have them on the call for her to listen is somewhat limited. So that's going to happen on Friday. And what I'd like to do is ask that if you are interested in receiving the information and the invite to the governor's listening session on racial justice, because the bandwidth is limited, this is not going to be widely promoted and spread. And I have a certain capacity to include a certain number of people. And I want to just say, if you are interested in being one of those people that gets the information to register, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham wants to hear what you have to say about racial justice in New Mexico. I am optimistic and hopeful that our Deputy Treasurer will attend this, and I'm going to specifically send him that invite. But if you are one of those individuals that has a particularly impactful story about racial justice in New Mexico and you need the governor to hear about that during this listening session, why don't you, because it's limited, because literally their bandwidth is limited, if you can send me a text, I will try and provide that invitation to the first few dozen people that text me and ask for that. I will send you that invitation. So text me this morning at 505-270-2154. That's my personal cell phone, 270-2154. I have a press conference this afternoon with the Supreme Court regarding our guardianship and conservatorship pilot program and our report out on that. So today's a little bit hectic. So if I don't respond to your text right away, that may be why, but I'll also only be able to give it to a limited number of people. So I will do that on a first come, first served basis with the text messages. Thank you to the governor's office for giving me that bandwidth to be able to extend that invitation to a few trusted Black voices that want to speak about racial and social justice in New Mexico, as we have been speaking about for the last month on a daily basis here on Cafecito con Colon. So Dr. Roybal, my understanding is the governor, because of bandwidth, did not want to make that link and invitation public. I got that straight from the governor's office in terms of them not wanting to promote that on social media. If that has changed and you know that that has changed, I'd ask you to repost the link that I just deleted there. Dr. Roybal, with all due respect, I was given real specific instructions on that. And so if you got different instructions, feel free to repost. I won't delete it a second time, but that's what I know. But you may know better because you're Dr. Lawrence Roybal, and I trust you. So I'll let you do with as you please there, and as instructed. And I would hope that they do, Ms. Olmsted, they do record that and provide that out. So good question. I don't know the answer to it. So let's see, we're going to get to our guest right now. We're at 9:13. Let me just blow through a couple of these other cool links that I wanted to share with you, but got distracted because I wanted to talk about the governor still. Happy birthday to Tamir Rice, who would have turned 18 today. Yeah. USA Today had two very powerful stories and photographs of Tamir's mom. And so if you'll take a minute to look at that. He was 12 years old. I don't even know what to say about that. But take a minute today. That picture of his mom on that second article I posted is quite striking, stunning, and photojournalism is so important. And somehow that photograph really spoke to me, and somehow I see the depth in her eyes about the loss of her son, who was shot and killed as a 12-year-old 6 years ago by officers who thought, I suspect, and did think that the toy gun that he had in his hand was not a toy gun. And I can't imagine. So let me come to you, Mr. Deputy Treasurer. Let me put up two positive stories. One, everybody knows I'm a Hamilton fan, and there is the Time story on that. And then USA Today, another good story. Imagine having a 74th wedding anniversary, and I wouldn't normally post it, but I just thought that this guy's advice after decades of love, 74 years of marriage, and how they celebrated under COVID-19. The guy says, I guess they asked him, what's the secret, Sam? And he says, sometimes you just got to know when to shut up. Or sometimes you got to know just when to keep your mouth shut. And I feel like that's true in politics and in marriage. Sometimes you just got to know when to keep your mouth shut. And in that regard, I have tried to keep my mouth shut over the last 4 weeks and listen, because the lived experience of Black men and women is something we have not learned about and we have not asked about. Even those of us who have Black friends and are not racist, and we are comforted by the fact that we have Black friends, very few of us have taken the time to listen to the lived experience of those Black friends. And we can't know better and do better until we listen. And so we have tried to provide a space on Cafecito con Colon each day to be able to listen and learn. And today is no different. Yesterday, and I think we've got about 2,500 views of Bree's time with us yesterday. Brianne Hudson shared some very powerful insights about her lived experience. And today I couldn't be more pleased and honored to have our Deputy State Treasurer with us. Let me tell you a little bit about his journey, and then we'll talk about it and I will listen. But he is a New Mexico native. So he knows the lived experience of that 3%, which at the time when he was a young man, I suspect that experience was of even fewer than 3% of New Mexicans. And Roswell and Hobbs, and interestingly enough, maybe had an overrepresentation, to my knowledge. They did have an overrepresentation of African Americans. We're going to have Dr. Pastor Becknell on with us next week. And the Pastor Becknell grew up in Hobbs, and he knows a lot of history as it relates to the Black experience in New Mexico. But today we have with us Deputy State Treasurer Sam Collins, who went to Eastern New Mexico and then got his final degree there at Pacific Western University and got into banking, a sector where, talk about rare airspace that I've been mentioning this last week, the finance sector. And I know I'm a finance major from New Mexico State University. You take a look at the banking landscape, and we have a great leader in the credit union sector in New Mexico, Marcia over there at the Eagle Credit Union, being the president of that bank. We have Paul Mondragon, Bank of America, who is a Latino in banking and one of the only regional presidents and the first Hispanic regional president, I think, of Bank of America. Thank you, Paul, for your leadership. And then we have Sam Collins, a man of color who at Union Savings Bank back in 1992 started his journey there and ultimately was the president and CEO and served there almost 2 decades, 18 years at Union Savings Bank as president CEO, which is a labor-owned financial union, an institution, and he led there. And then went over to San Luis Trust Bank for about a year, and then became the market president of First California Bank. And after that, we in New Mexico became the beneficiaries of that incredible journey and leadership in banking. And he brought that experience to civil service, which we see so often and we're grateful for. He was the cash manager for a few years at the treasurer's office, then was the public funds treasury management vice president at the First National Bank of Santa Fe, another great local bank. And then I got to tell you, one of the best decisions, Tim Eichenberg, he's had almost 4 decades of public service in New Mexico's political landscape, phenomenal leader, mentor, friend of mine. And Tim Eichenberg made one of his best decisions almost 5 years ago. He brought on somebody as the deputy state treasurer, a trailblazer who took his banking experience and brought it to civil service in the office of the state treasurer under Tim Eichenberg as our deputy state treasurer of New Mexico. And I couldn't be more pleased than to be able to invite and then be able to say thank you to Sam Collins, deputy treasurer of New Mexico. Thanks for joining us on Cafecito con Colon.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I am terrific. And now I'm even better now that we get to turn over and listen and learn from your lived experience as a leader in New Mexico and a Roswell native, Chavez County, coming at you live on Cafecito con Colon. Sam Collins, deputy treasurer.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to your show. I mean, you're a brave man to bring me on your show. I mean, to bring someone on like me to listen, I'm flattered, and certainly we're fortunate to be in New Mexico. It's a great time to be in New Mexico. We've got great leadership. You talked about Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, yourself, Hector, the AG, treasurer. It's just a great time to be in New Mexico. I dare say if I had an issue with race, then we could have a press conference that would rival any that's ever happened. We've got some great leadership. So thank you for inviting me to speak. Like you said, I'm born and raised in Roswell, New Mexico. You know, and it's funny. When you live in northern New Mexico, everybody has a preconceived notion of what southeastern New Mexico is. They call it Little Texas. I mean, we hear y'all saying that when we're down there, you know, calling it Little Texas and those sorts of things. But you know, Roswell was good to me growing up. I started my banking career in high school. Kind of an interesting story.
Did you go to Roswell or Goddard? Did you go to Roswell or Goddard or the military academy? Where did you end up going?
I went to Roswell High School.
Okay. Was Goddard's been around a long time, right?
Goddard's been around a long time, but Roswell High has been around longer.
Right. But it was around when you were a child, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're a little older. You look younger than me, but I just want to point out to our Cafecito con Colon listeners that while you look younger than me, I actually am younger than you.
Yes, you are.
It's about that experience, Roswell High.
Absolutely. You know, I was junior in high school and sitting in class, you know, just kind of being a high school kid, and I got a referral to go to the counselor's office, which I never hardly ever went to the counselor's office. So I went down there, and the counselor said, Sam, uh, one of the local banks is looking for a black kid to run the mail. And I was like, what? I mean, it was the 70s, but that was still a strange request. But hey, I didn't have a job, so I went down to Security National Bank, which became SunWest. You know how banks merge and things. And I applied for a job, and lo and behold, they gave me a job as their mail boy to pick up the mail, move the work between the branches, and proof and deliver cash and things. So I never understood why they asked that question. But looking back on it now, I imagine there were quotas back then. And you talked about the 3%. They probably, the employment of the company had to mirror the racial makeup of the community. And they probably didn't have 3% Black employees. So they needed a half of an FTE to be in compliance. And so they can't just manufacture qualified employees. So they went to the high school and got me. And that's where I started my banking career, and it just kind of clicked and worked. And I worked at the bank and went to school.
Real quick, Sam, can I interrupt you just to give a shout out to Eloisa Tabet? People have heard me shout her out before, but Eloisa Tabet was in banking at First National Bank of Berlin when the president of the bank or whoever did it hired me while I was in high school to run the mail down at First National Bank of Berlin. So I just have to give her a quick shout out. She was a great supervisor. I went on to become a teller there, and it was really my first professional job outside the flea market. And so I just say that that's a point of pride to know that I was on the same path as Mr. Sam Collins.
Hey, bank was a good job. It wasn't out in the hot sun. It was nice and cool. A lot of perks that went with that job. So
when did you look back and kind of go, when they said they were looking for a Black man or a Black boy to run the mail, when did that actually kind of click for you as something that may have been either quota driven or that made you wonder, did I get this job because the circumstances and they had to meet that quota, or how did you kind of flip the mentality? And then all of a sudden, of course, now we're looking back and you've been president of the bank.
At the time, I didn't know. I thought, was it a racist thing? We want to have, a Black kid pick up our mail. I didn't know, but I didn't care. I didn't figure it out or develop a hypothesis until a couple of years ago. I was speaking to a group, and after I spoke, one of the ladies came up to me and said, they had quotas back in the 70s. That must have been what it was. It wasn't, I was concerned maybe it was a racist thing, but it wasn't. It was really their form to me of affirmative action. Giving a Black kid a chance to get on the ladder, and getting on the ladder doesn't guarantee you that you'll get to the top of the ladder, but you get on the ladder, and then what you do from there is all about the kind of work you put in.
I love that. And tell us what happened after that time on the teller line or in the mailroom.
Well, it was a high school part-time job that was just, it exposed me to the environment. And, it was kind of interesting working in in banking in the 70s. I was a high school kid, so I didn't go into banking like a lot of people did in management. Apparently, me and you. I was just one of the clerical workers, and so I worked with a lot of the ladies that were on staff and got to see their struggle, see their journey. I mean, a lot of those single mothers were working hard and really carrying the water for the bank and working for peanuts, but doing just an amazing job. And so I identified with those ladies, not listen to them complain about, the different struggles that a lady would have in the 70s in a banking world. And I'm always promised if I ever got to be a boss, I would be sensitive to the needs of mothers and women in the workplace. And that served me well.
That's awesome. Tell us, in Roswell and Hobbs, like I said, they're in some ways, the Black community there is a very tight-knit community from what I know, what I've seen over my engagement points over the last 20 years when I've been down in, Lee County, Chavez County, in that area. And I'm always, my heart always grows when I go over there because I always feel so embraced by that community. But tell us about, what was it like to grow up there, and then maybe as you went over to Eastern, over to Portales, I guess, what was that like? Portales doesn't really have the same texture and community support, I would assume, structurally anyway, in terms of numbers to support a Black young man who's trying to get through college.
The Black community in Roswell is small, so it's everybody knows you. It takes a village. So if they didn't know your name, they knew, well, that's SK and Margaret's boy. So it was cool, and you could. Those were good old times back then. You could run around, stay out until 5 o'clock when your folks got home from work, and it was just a fun place to be. And because we were such a small portion of the community, we integrated. So it wasn't like there was a Black part of town or we just had Black friends. We all got along, Hispanics, white, everybody. We all got along, we played together, chased girls together. We all did whatever we did and just integrated. And that's why I think we're lucky to be in New Mexico, because it is an integrated place. So a lot of the issues that they have in other parts of the country, we don't necessarily fight with and have in our face on a daily basis as New Mexicans. We're fortunate.
I think that's right. And tell us about the transition from Portales into banking and what happened after that.
Well, I didn't do like a lot of people. I didn't take that straight route where you go from high school to college and go away to college for 4 years. I was working at night. I was on the parallel route, so I was working during the day and going to school at night, and so it was just grinding it out. And so while everybody else was having the college experience, doing frats and the sororities and all that stuff, I was grinding. I was at the bank doing work. I moved from Security National Bank to Pioneer Bank and Trust. And
hey, that was my bank. I have never gotten as close to my bankers as I did at Pioneer Savings and Trust there. And they had a great branch in Las Cruces. And I got to know the teller line really well because back in those days, don't tell anybody, but you used to be able to kite checks. And every morning at about 8:30 in the morning, I'd get that phone call from the teller line saying, hey, Brian, you got to bring in $17. Otherwise, we got to send this check back. If we don't have your money by 9 o'clock, you're going to be in trouble. And I have to run over there and go put in my $17 so that they could pay that check that was coming through. Now it feels like before I hand the check across the counter, it's already cleared the bank. But back in those days, and I just love Pioneer. What a great team. I didn't know you were at Pioneer.
Yeah, they were in the big house there in Las Cruces back then, right?
Right, right. Well, first they were in the first before that, buddy. They were on Telshore, and then they got the historic house there on at the end of Loman. I don't know if it's still Loman right there, but yeah, I mean, what a great team. Whatever they did for kind of customer service training and outreach training. They just, I remember being a small business person. Well, I remember when I was in college trying to not bounce checks, and then after that, having my cellular business. They did my banking for my cell phone business as well, and they were just terrific.
Those were the good old days when you could race the check to the bank.
That's right.
It doesn't work that way anymore.
No, sir. No, sir. So Pioneer, and then you went to a larger institution, even.
Yeah, Pioneer was good to me. I mean, I started there as an accounting clerk and ended up being controller. So, didn't really lose a lot of time. I was controller of the bank there when I was in my mid to late 20s. So things were happening concurrently. And then in 92, I came to Albuquerque to work for a small institution, as you mentioned, labor owned. Labor is a whole nother world that I'd never been exposed to. And what a neat deal. I mean, they fight the fight for the love. Talk about a passionate group of people. So, and they did a lot of great things, built out the Renaissance, created a ton of union jobs. I have a lot of respect for labor. I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for labor.
That's beautiful. And you paid it forward with so much good community service and investing in the social profit sector, and understanding that, the public-private partnerships are important, and understanding that working in the philanthropic community and the nonprofit sector with business, you can really have exponential growth and power and capacity and bandwidth. And I know that Lynn gave you a quick shout out. Lynn Troyan gave you a quick shout out for having been so supportive of Acción, which is now DreamSpring. And I know you've gotten to work in that sector as well.
She is a truly talented lady. I mean, your wallet will just jump out and money will just fly out. She's amazing. And you'll just like, man, that was the best money I ever gave. That was good.
That's exactly right. You finish meeting with her and you're like, where do I send the check?
That's right. Can I send another? Thank you, may I send another?
Thank you, may I send another? That's exactly right. In fact, she gets us all to say yes, and yes, I'll make that initial contribution, and I'll be a part of your capital campaign. She is truly amazing. So tell us more. Give us, part of what we want to do each day on Cafecito con Colon is listen and learn, and really kind of understand the lived experience of Black women and Black men in New Mexico in particular, because we talk about the multicultural beauty of our state, which that is true, but far too often we have failed to recognize opportunities for growth and improvement because we have failed to discuss what it's like to understand the lens that Black men and women look through on a daily basis, which may not be as beautiful as the narrative that we like to tell. And I think in order for us to be the best allies we can be, and to understand during this time, when we talk about Black Lives Mattering, and when we talk about having a better understanding of how we do community policing or deconstructing public safety, we have to hear your story. And I'm hoping that maybe you'll share a little bit about what it's like to live for as long as you've lived, and mostly all of it in New Mexico.
Yeah, I tell you, I would be not truthful if I didn't say that, the community of Roswell was supportive of me, and the banking community since then, and in government. If you were in New Mexico, if you're willing to show up and put in work, people don't generally care if you're, white, yellow, black, or green. If you'll show up and do work, they will support you. And I give a lot of credit to the Hispanic community for opening those doors, and then our 3% got to go in with you because you guys are a minority majority, which makes it nice for us. Were there things that we battled with? Yeah, occasionally. But it was important to me from the way my father raised me is, you know, don't stand around waiting for somebody to make a way for you. You go out there and you work hard and get what you need to get. He was the type of guy that retired from AT&T, started out there washing the trucks, washing Mountain Bell trucks. And in the 50s, they wouldn't allow him to test for higher positions. Wow. So eventually into the 70s, he was allowed to do that and move up. But for me, it's been good, but I would be remiss if I didn't look at at how my other contemporaries and brethren, the struggles that they have locally and nationally. I mean, it's tough. I mean, incarceration, economically, African Americans are behind, and I think a lot of that is just it's funny. It's like people are playing with strikes, and because the family's not there, the education's not there, you don't make the money, then you don't get the job, you don't make the money, and next thing you know, your options are limited. And just to say what a person wouldn't do if they had limited or no options. My journey is atypical. I've been a fortunate person. I've had people that supported me in banking, in labor. James Lewis recruited me into government, and that was a whole new world that opened up to me, which has been great, and certainly Treasurer Eichenberg has helped me as well. But the community in New Mexico, like I said, if you'll show up and work hard, they'll support you. I mean, I go to the Roundhouse, and I've never once felt like I didn't belong.
But you readily admit that your journey is an exception and not the rule. I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Right. Because I think I hear you when you say that, and I appreciate that. But I think it can't be lost that, after a month of listening to people that are in my universe and orbit, who are Black men and Black women, there are very few. In fact, you are the first to be so positive about the journey you've had. And I wonder why that's different than the experience of every other Black woman or Black man that I've had on Cafecito. And but you started there. You started saying mine's the exception. But I wonder how you got there.
Well, I think a lot of it is, again, goes back to my upbringing. And ignorance is bliss a lot of times. My father wanted to make it clear to me growing up that there was no ceiling. Because once you are aware there's a ceiling or feel there's a ceiling, that ceiling becomes real. And he was adamant that, Sam, if you'll do the work, there's nothing you can't do. You can be the president of the country if you want to. And so I put on my rose-colored glasses, and I was in there. I was as big and Black as you want to be, and I just belonged there. And I kind of had a little bit of a swagger. That's where I was supposed to be. And I'm as good as anybody else in here, so I belong here. If people look, I'm good with that. I kind of dig that. So, it was just, but again, not everybody had the same breaks that I had. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm a lucky person. And
I think I appreciate that. And I have that same pair of glasses, by the way, Sam. And I can tell you that I think the challenge is that you and I had those rose-colored glasses to pick up off the table and put them on because of the situation and circumstances we found ourselves in. And, you know, Bree talked yesterday about recognizing her own privilege, even as a Black woman, that privilege was real, and that her experience was slightly different, although she certainly encountered acts of racism and dealt with those. But what I'm hearing you say is that you know, you were surrounded in a system and a set of circumstances that really allowed you to find those glasses on the table, put them up, put them on, and be where you are today. But that the fact that that's the exception, not the rule, is very real.
Absolutely. And you look at the struggles that other African Americans are fighting with, and it's tough. And so just I think those of us that have had a measure of success, or that have been able to navigate and get through and achieve some level of success, can't forget about everybody else that hasn't had that same journey. We've got to look at what the struggles are and the systemic issues that are in place that make Black men end up in jail. That's destroying the Black home unit. I mean, we've got to do.
Your dad was at home. Right. I mean, he was working for Mount Bell. He was working under bad circumstances and was put in a box that didn't allow him to achieve what he probably could have achieved had the system not marginalized his capacity for success by not allowing him to test out. But nevertheless, he set that example of tenacity and work ethic, and brought you up and put those rose-colored glasses on the table for you to pick up, and you were able to. And anytime you didn't want to wear them, I suspect that he helped you remember that they were there for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and when he got done working at the telephone company, he picked me up and we go clean buildings all night. We had 6 or 7 buildings a night that we would clean on the side to make ends meet. And my mother, who passed a few years ago, worked for the health office. She was an RN, nurse practitioner. And she was a trailblazer too. She was at the high school teaching sex ed back in the 70s, which was like unheard of. She'd pass out bags of condoms and things, and people about lost their
minds. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about that on Cafecito con Colon. I'm very shy. Come on now. Come on. Bags of what? Bags of cotton. Yeah. Well, come on now. I'm getting all embarrassed and shy.
Yeah, you're shy. No.
That's pretty cool. I'm surprised, to be honest with you. I mean, Chavez County is not known to be the most progressive in terms of conversations, yet they were having sex ed there in Roswell in 1970.
Well, no, in the 70s, the late 70s.
Okay. That's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it wasn't without, some people pushing back and going, how dare you need to preach abstinence. And she was just like, well, that's not realistic. They're not going to abstain, so you better do something.
I wish I could have met your mom. She sounds like a pretty dynamic woman to push back on the system like that. Because I know that even in Valencia County, I think about sex ed back in Los Unes, which would have been in the late 70s, early 80s. I graduated in 88. It was pretty, I remember one video one day, and the boys were in one room and the girls were in the other. And I'm not even sure that we paid attention to the video that we were supposed to be watching, because I was wondering, well, I want to know what they're watching in there, as opposed to paying attention to what I was watching. Thank goodness I found my way, and then of course married my wife, and then somehow figured out how to have a son. It worked out okay. I wanted 6 kids. Lily wanted 2 or 3. God blessed us with 1. And maybe had I watched the movie a little bit more, we'd have had more than 1 child. I don't know. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's the instructions, right?
So
Go ahead.
go with that lived experience. I appreciate the perspective because it's much different than kind of things we've heard about so far on Cafecito.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people would say, dude, you are naive. You do not get it.
Hmm.
And there, I I'm not naive. I know that, there's absolutely struggle going on, but, you talk about the guest you had yesterday that said there's a Black privilege. There's a lot of people fighting all sorts of battles. I was in a training earlier this week and on disability. And you want to talk about a tough draw. The disability community, they're struggling too. I mean, through COVID-19, if you're already having issues financially, medically, like the African American community, like the disability community, and then COVID-19 hits, you don't have that margin for error. And one of the cool programs that Treasurer Eichenberg set up at the state treasurer's office is the ABLE program, Achieve a Better Life Experience program, which allows people with disabilities to actually accumulate some money without negatively impacting their SSI benefits. Can you imagine if you're a citizen but you can't accumulate any money? How can you succeed?
And that's under his leadership and the great work of Heather and Denise in terms of promoting it out there and your leadership. And let me just I just want to put an exclamation mark on that, on the quality of that program and what a difference it's made. And they're tweaking it out to try and make sure that it becomes even more robust in the years to come. And I totally support that work. So thank you for remembering to bring that up.
And just because I got to say it, Treasurer Eichenberg agreed to set that program up with no appropriation. He was passionate about it, said, let's do it. The legislature gave him no money and he got it off the ground and it's successful.
And I posted the link to that program. And I just want to say that Elena said how fantastic it is to work with you and thanks you for your public service. And I hope you'll take some time to go back and review these comments because lots of nice accolades and insights that are coming in from my extrovert therapist. They're all online giving treatment right now. And so make sure you check that out when we're done. But that ABLE program is fantastic. So take a minute to look at that. And thank you for highlighting yet another community that is often underrepresented and often doesn't have a seat at the table for the conversations as we try and become a better community. And that is those with disabilities. My father had muscular dystrophy, so that's an area that's near and dear to my heart. As you may know, I presented at the conference each year, and so anyway, thank you for bringing it up.
Oh, absolutely. And there are just a lot of different groups that are all struggling. You start to layer these things, you end up being a minority, dealing with disabilities. Women haven't had a great draw all along either, and they've got their fight. So if you're a Black woman who's gay, who has some disability or mental health, you start to layer these things and it can get tough. And I guess where I'm at is
it's that intersectionality that we talk about so frequently, or not frequently enough, but often we talk about that intersectionality, transgender, women of color, and there's this, and it feels like, I think somebody mentioned it last week. We don't want to talk about the race to the bottom for being the most marginalized, but certainly that intersectionality really does start to layer, and I appreciate you putting it that way.
I've never heard that word, but that's a good word. I'm gonna take a note.
Mm-hmm.
Intersectionality, and I'm gonna use that one. That's gonna be part of my deal now. But I think it's good to know. But certainly, I think the cool thing about the Black Lives Matter initiative, it's getting a lot of press. People are aware that everything just isn't okay for everybody. the Black community in Albuquerque, to a certain extent, everybody's got their heads down doing work in their own world, if it's medicine or education or banking or government. And so everybody's kind of got their heads down doing work. But I think the cool thing about this is, the outpouring of concern and just wanting to understand, like you hosting this show to go, Sam, tell me your journey and listening. I'm touched by that, and the governor put together a council, and I think everybody is sympathetic to certainly what we struggle with and what we've all gone through. And
What's different this time, Sam?
well, I think time will tell. We've been here before where everyone runs and says, let's help the minority community, the African American community. But time will tell. Will laws be put into place to make sure that sentencing is consistent across different groups? That the treatment by the police officers is consistent across different groups? The camera ordinance that is on the governor's desk. I mean, to make sure that things are being policed. And I feel bad for the police because they've got a tough draw. That is a tough job to do. They have to make, their life or the other's life in a split second. And it's a bell-shaped curve. The majority of cops are good people, and there's some bad apples in the fringe, just like people. But I think as a leader in government, I think that's what government's got to do, is make sure that there are ways to make sure that people that are at risk are not brutalized. And certainly the work that you've done with the press conference you're having this afternoon for a truly vulnerable population. Let's talk about a vulnerable population there too. And yourself and AG Valderas, you guys have gone in with the swinging the bat and kicking butt and taking names to protect those people. And I'm glad that you do, because
I'm going to quote Deputy Treasurer Collins on that. Brian went in swinging the bat, kicking some butt, taking some names, and protecting New Mexico's most vulnerable. That is our people in our community who are under conservatorships and guardianships. And I appreciate you saying that in all seriousness.
It is what it is. That's what you all are doing, and it needed to be done. Somebody's got to.
We thank the legislature for their leadership in giving us an opportunity with that pilot program, and frankly, the Supreme Court of New Mexico giving us, having the faith in us to do the right thing and to bring accountability and transparency to that universe of people who are under conservatorships and guardianships, to make sure that we do the right thing. And so today at 1 o'clock or so, I will be hosting my press conference, and it will stream on this channel. So if you want to tune into that press conference, I'll be hosting it with Supreme Court Justice Bacon, Judge Franchini on our courts. Also did a phenomenal amount of work in this space, and so I want to thank her and the Administrative Office of the Courts for doing a good job, and again trusting us with this work. And I appreciate the Office of the State Auditor and the team I have there, much like your team there that has the ABLE program and that manages our checkbook for the state and does a great job getting returns on our investment of overnight deposits and things, just the important work that you do every day. I think that, the teams that we have allowed people to have confidence in those seals that we put up. One seal says the Office of the Treasurer, the other seal says the Office of the State Auditor. And I'm very honored to be able to hold this office for a period of time and do this good work with people like you, Sam.
Well, the cool thing about working for government as compared to the private sector is you can do what's right, not necessarily what's profitable. And when government's doing its thing, then it doesn't matter if that's not going to make us any money. It's the right thing to do, and you can go and do that. It's a neat thing. That's one of the best things about public service.
Do the right thing. What does that make you think of?
Spike.
That's right. So there you have it, folks. I am just so happy that we were able to bring on just such a phenomenal leader in New Mexico, and somebody who's inspired me from afar. I have watched our Deputy State Treasurer testify at the legislature. I have watched him provide information to the treasurer, and it's really been amazing. I think a nice thing, that was a nice segue. I just posted the link on the Variety story about Spike's movie, Do the Right Thing, which I think is streaming for free online right now. So people can check that out. And also the new movie that he did and released, I've promoted that here on Cafecito con Colon, but that's also streaming on Netflix. And also maybe streaming online free, even if you don't have Netflix somewhere. But I'll let you check that out. Sam, tell us, is there anything else you want to share with us before we get on to the rest of our day? You've been generous with your time. I'm grateful for your leadership in civil service. You know, when your dad and my grandparents and parents, when they were our age, you know, civil service was celebrated. You were a GS 8 or a GS 12, and I think of my surrogate mom, Ophelia Munzer, who had a distinguished career in the State Department. We used to really celebrate and appreciate and value civil servants, and unfortunately, we've gotten away from that. So I take every opportunity I can to say thank you for civil servants out there. And you've had a distinguished career in banking for decades at the highest levels. And you could have gone on to continue that work and continue that phenomenal journey of success through those rose-colored glasses that you wear, but that high skill set that you bring to the table. But you've chosen civil service, and so I don't think you hear it often enough. But I'm grateful that you've chosen that journey of civil service now.
Well, you're kind, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on your show and give my my experience, and I'm proud to serve for the citizens of the state of New Mexico. It's their money, not mine.
Well, there you go. And we're lucky to have you there protecting it, investing it, and leading with it as our cash manager, and now as our deputy state treasurer. You know, we're going to have James Lewis on in the future, but I think about people who have held that office with distinction, and of course the trailblazer, who's the statewide elected official who blazed a trail for a Black man to be elected statewide. That is James B. Lewis, our former state treasurer. And hopefully Sam Collins thinks about not just civil service, but service in public office down the road. I know you've got your own journey, but let me just say that, and, you know, that's a favorite expression of James Lewis. People compare me on occasion, on my best days, they compare me to James Lewis in terms of my energy and enthusiasm. And that's always nice. But one of the things that he always does, he says, let me just say, and he always says that. And so I always think of James Lewis, but let me just say that Sam Collins, when you're ready to run for statewide public office, you call Brian Colon and I'll be answering the phone. I'll stand there with you. Thank you for your leadership. Thanks for your service. And thanks for being our Deputy State Treasurer of New Mexico and being so candid with us on Cafecito con Colon.
Thank you for the invite.
You bet. Call me anytime, my friend. And ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap up this episode of Cafecito con Colon right on the top of the hour at 10 o'clock, I want to say thank you for being my extrovert therapist. Tomorrow, you'll be able to join us and learn about the lived experience of somebody who's a phenomenal leader, not just in financial planning, but also in cybersecurity. His name and my friend, Chad Cooper. He's also one of the founders and leaders in the African American Chamber of Commerce that we've got started here in Albuquerque and in New Mexico. So don't forget to tune in tomorrow on Cafecito con Colon at 9 a.m. for Chad Cooper. And on Saturday, I am going to bring you a very special guest, somebody who I've talked about on prior episodes with deep affection, but my friend who lives in Washington, D.C., who's a New Mexican through and through, Tommy McKinney Jr. You've heard me talk about him. You've heard me talk about the blessing that I had of mentoring him along the way in his journey over the last 20 some odd years. And he became a tremendous graduate of UNM, went on to get his master's degree. He's a leader in finance. He works in Washington, D.C. and looked over my son for 4 years while my son lived out there He is a dear, dear, dear friend of mine. And I can't wait to bring him on for a very personal and intimate conversation about our journey together. Tommy McKinney on Saturday. And then on Monday, we'll have Dr. Lenton Mowry, the first Black to serve in our legislature, Black man to serve in our and on our county commission, Dr. Lenton Mowry. And then on Tuesday, we'll have Dr. Reverend Pastor Becknell. And so we got a great lineup for you. I'm just grateful that Sam Collins joined us today. I encourage you to make it a great day. Reach out to people who are in isolation and remind them they're not alone. Remind them that you care. Send them the best regards from Brian Colon, their state auditor and deputy treasurer, Sam Collins. Tell them that we love them. Tell them that we're grateful and that we love all 2.1 million New Mexicans that we get to serve each and every day. Sam, give my best regards to Treasurer Tim Eichenberg, and let's make a difference every single day. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye now.